Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Episode number two is the camera of Aaron's movie reviews. My last one I did just about an hour ago. As I record this, I'm going to get on a little bit of a roll tonight. This one's going to be a little bit longer than the last one, though, because I have a lot of things to say about this movie. One of my favorite movies, probably one of my favorite horror movies of all time. Certainly in the top 10, 15 favorite horror movies. One of my favorite Wes Craven movies ever. And it gets unjustly ridiculed, unjustly bashed, and I don't understand it. But the movie is called Shocker. That is the Scream Factory Blu-ray that came out in, I believe, 2015 or 16. I picked it up almost immediately. For anybody that does know me that sees this, um, my wife hates horror movies, and even my wife likes Shocker. She hates horror movies, but even she would sit down and watch Shocker with me and thought it was highly entertaining. So basically, a little bit of a backstory about this movie. First, a little personal backstory. When I was a kid, I saw this when I was probably about 9, maybe 10. My parents would let me watch horror movies because I was a good kid. You know, I didn't go out and try to hurt anybody, so they would let me watch horror movies. And back then, we had a thing called video stores, which unfortunately we don't have those anymore. We have a thing called video stores back then, and basically my week would consist of going to school and doing good and not getting in trouble. And on the weekends, I can go. My mom or dad, usually my mom, would take me to Blockbuster or a place called Family Video, which is right down the street from where we lived. A Blockbuster is maybe about a 10-minute drive, but if I was really good, I get to go to Blockbuster and rent some movies on the weekends. Blockbuster had thousands of movies. I can rent video games too, but usually I would just get movies. So Blockbuster had thousands of movies, literally thousands of movies in that gigantic store. But I would usually always get the same movies because I really loved them, and Shocker was one of them. I remember the first time I got it, I just happened to see the case, which this case right here is the Shout Factory alternate cover, which I like it. I think it's pretty cool, and it gives away the movie really, really well. But let's see if I can get out the slip cover and the actual poster. And what I saw on the box of the cassette was that was the original cover, and I remember it just catching my attention at that point. And so I rented it. I took it home, and I remember the opening Universal commercial with the Universal Studios commercial they have at the beginning of all those old VHS tapes, and it would have King Kong trying to get out of this big giant cage or whatever, and have jaws coming up out of the water, and always thinking that was cool. And then the movie would start with, of course, the Universal logo, and then this just amazingly kick-ass rock song would start playing. And that's how Shocker starts, is with a rock song. A song called Shocker by a group called the Dudes of Wrath, which is basically a super group. And we'll get into the music later because the music has a big part to do with why I love this movie so much. But it would basically say, if I remember right, it would say like a Live Pictures presents a Universal Studios production, a Wes Craven film, and then all of a sudden this gigantic TV just drops right on the table and it says Shocker. And being a 10 or 11-year-old kid, that just immediately, for some reason, the music on top of the big giant TV dropping and this big massive hairy arm showing up, which is supposedly Horse Finger's arm, showing up right in front of the camera, dropping this big TV, all caught my attention. I absolutely was just enthralled. And then from that point on, the rest of the movie, I was hooked. Everything about this movie I loved. And looking back now, I can, well, I can't. I can't even sit there and say I understand why people hate this movie so much. I guess, to each their own. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion, and that's cool. But for me, it's just incredibly fun, entertaining movie. Now, as with all my reviews, there are spoilers in this thing. So if you haven't seen Shocker, I'll give you just the Cliff Notes version of what it's about, and then you can decide if you want to see it later on down the road. The same year, 1989, a movie called House 3 and an alternate title of The Horror Show came out that starred Lance Hankerson and Brian James. And it and Shocker were so ridiculously similar. Almost like the directors had made a bet they're going to make the exact same movie and see which one can get over more. Wes Craven, and because I'm not reviewing the Horror Show, I haven't looked up who the director was. I believe it was Jim Isaacs, who directed Jason X. I could be wrong, but I think that's who it was, the director of the Horror Show. And Sean Cunningham produced it because he produced all the House movies. But Shocker, the main story, the main point of the story is there is a killer on the loose in a small town called Maryville, Ohio. He is slaughtering entire families, mostly in their sleep. Sometimes he would come in when they weren't asleep, but for the most part, they were asleep. And the body count was up to like 30 or more when the movie starts. And in fact, at the very beginning, during the opening credits, there is a shot of a female victim being put on a gurney with a bloody arm. That is Heather Langenkamp, who played Nancy in the original and third Nightmare on Elm Street movies. So Heather Langenkamp has a cameo for her, first big director, Wes Craven. Or I guess her second. She was in The Outsiders with Francis Ford Coppola. So her second big movie was Nightmare on Elm Street, and so she did this little cameo for Wes. It starts off with this guy in this TV repair shop just fixing TVs, and the news stories are going on in the background of what's going on, and all these murders, and all the city is obviously terrified of just a lot of bad shit going on, stuff going on. Sorry. So as the movie picks up, we see this guy named Jonathan Parker, who is played by Peter Berg, who is the big movie director now of Friday Night Lights and Lone Survivor and a few other big movies. My dog's barking at something. Maisie, hush. Anyway, he's at college. He gets a drink from a blonde girl who's behind the counter, gets him a drink, and it's Jessica Craven, Wes Craven's daughter, playing that part. And they're talking about, she sees on the news that the killer struck again, and Jonathan basically says, I think a really funny line, if you don't like the news during, change the channel, which is kind of how I feel sometimes too. I don't like the news either, so I'll just change the channel. I listen to Jonathan's words. But he goes to football practice. He plays football at this, I don't know if it's supposed to be a junior college or a regular college. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but he's playing football there at the local college. He's looks like he's a tight end from where he lines up. He has a friend named Rhino, who's played by Richard Brooks, and they have some really funny dialogue between them as they're lining up, and Jonathan gets smashed by Rhino, and Rhino's basically talking trash to him, and he has a really funny line of telling Parker he needs to get his head back into it because he gets more ass in a toilet seat. That's his words, which is a line I use all the time now, just from that movie. And Jonathan tells him to fix his laces before he breaks his neck, and he looks down to look at his laces, and Jonathan pushes him off, takes off running downfield, makes a catch between two defenders, jukes him, goes into the end zone, and looks at Rhino running his mouth. And as he looks at Rhino and runs his mouth, he runs smack dab into a pole, or smack dab into the goalpost, which was just hilarious. And he's laying there unconscious, or he's laying there not unconscious, but he's rolling around. He's hurt. Part of it was he had looked over at his girlfriend, played by Cammie Cooper, who's Allison, played by Cammie Cooper, who's standing on the sideline. And he looks back at her and says, "I'm very good," and looks back at Rhino and makes fun of him, and then runs smack into the goalpost. A few minutes later, you see him, like he's groggy, and the coach Oh, I missed this part earlier. So before they line up and Rhino and Jonathan starts talking smack, the coach, uh, who's a real hard ass kind of coach, kind of just starts like making fun, getting on to Jonathan for not concentrating. And at a certain point, he says something about a pretty young lady in the stands with no shirt on. Jonathan looks up into the stands and he smacks his helmet off his head. Really, I mean, just humorous stuff. But for anybody who's watched a Wes Craven movie, this is nothing new. This is what Wes does. He mixes horror and comedy incredible. He did mix horror and comedy incredibly well, and there was a lot of humor in this movie. And there are people, I've heard this in other reviews too that have mentioned this. There are people that say it was unintentional humor. BS. It's Wes Craven. It was very intentional. It was there to it was put there to kind of calm you down and get you focused, and then all of a sudden hit you with a scare. The first kind of probably 40 minutes of Shocker is just a straight slasher horror movie. It is a dark and very, very violent horror movie. Once we'll get to the part a little bit where the killer gets caught by the police, it turns into this fantasy adventure. And it's, still has its horror elements, but it is very comedic and very fantasy like. It's still very violent. But Jonathan gets back up. He falls over the table that has all the Gatorade stuff on it because he's obviously got a concussion of some sort after running into the goalpost. And he cut to a few minutes later. He and his girlfriend, who has a great lineup, she said, "You once told me you wanted me to bury your children." And he said, "Did you? Did you bury my children? Or bury my children?" And she's like, "No, we haven't even slept together." They're walking down the street, and Jonathan comes up on a house with a van out front that says Pinker's TV Repair. And he realizes it's his adopted family's house. He walks in the front door, and his adopted mother and adopted little sister, he finds his adopted brother dead on the floor. He goes upstairs and finds his adopted mom and sister being stalked by this bald, psychotic, crazy guy with a big, huge knife. And he runs to attack the guy to save his family and just disappears and wakes up in his bed, realizes it's a dream. And as soon as he wakes up, Allison's there next to him. She's still there, kind of making sure he's okay. And she decided to stay with him that night. The phone rings, and it's his father, who is a police detective played by Michael Murphy. He tells him something bad's happened. He goes to the house and finds that everything he had saw in his dream was real. His brother was dead in the living room floor. His mom and sister were butchered upstairs. And so he knows who this guy is. He's seen this guy. He's seen this guy's van. He knows what he's done for a living. So after the funerals, he and his adopted father go and try to find this guy with some other cops. And then a whole big scene happens where this cop gets murdered. Two other cops get murdered outside after the killer kills the cop in the back of the TV repair shop. He then steals the cop's uniform, goes outside and kills two other cops before he disappears. So he somehow gets away, even though his place is surrounded by cops. He's able to kill three cops and get away. The next morning, you see the killer, or you see his hands. You haven't seen his face yet, but you see his hands, and he is like smoking a cigarette, and he realizes that this Jonathan Parker kid is able to figure out who he is. He knows exactly who he is. So Parker wakes up to go to college, to go to his classes, and when he does, Pinker attacks and kills Allison. Brutal, brutal scene too. Takes her, she's brushing her teeth. She just got out of the bathtub. She turns around, and he's right there. He grabs her, stabs her multiple times with a knife, uh, grabs her by the throat, and just smears blood all over the floor. Brutal, brutal death scene. And Jonathan's at football practice when he gets the news that he better go home. Something bad happened. He finds Allison in the bathtub with blood overflowing the bathtub. And at this point, for me personally, just to stop the review here for a second. For me personally, I'm one of those people that I really, really enjoy the villains in horror movies. Like to me, they're always more interesting. They've always got a better story. This is one of those movies, one of the few movies where I had absolutely no, I had nothing but sympathy for Jonathan. I absolutely loved Jonathan Parker. He was such a good character, such a good guy. You wanted to root for him. Allison was an absolute sweetheart. On top of being beautiful, she was a sweetheart who cared about her boyfriend, who seemed incredibly nice. And so when you see this guy doing this, and you know that he's just murdered a little girl who you saw earlier in the movie, you know he murdered her too. It's like, God, what a piece of shit. I mean, they really did a great job of making this horrible, horrible human being as Horace Pinker, who Mitch Pileggi played so good. Those of you who watch the X Files, he is Walter Skinner on the X Files, and he was so good as Horace Pinker. I mean, so good. But like I said, until after the murder of his girlfriend at the funeral, he realizes what he needs to do to catch this guy. So he and Rhino come up with a plan where he's asleep, he dreams it, Rhino wakes him up, and they go. And the plan is to try to kill him, catch him or kill him. Well, the police, his father, the Lieutenant Parker knows what he's trying to do, so he has cops set to follow Jonathan wherever Jonathan goes. Jonathan leads them to him. There's a big standoff. Pinker's hold this girl hostage. He throws her down the stairs, takes off running, and when he does, Jonathan takes off after him while the cops try to go around to the other side of the building to catch him. And there's this great moment where they're up on a rooftop, and there's another building, and there's somehow a ladder up there. So Pinker takes the ladder and he sets it up on one side, from one side to the other, and kind of tight ropes across it, which is a really cool looking stunt. I mean, this Pinker is not a small guy. When Parker sees this, he tries to follow him, and Pinker, being very smart, grabs the ladder, takes it, and throws it down. So it's gone all the way to the ground. There's no ladder, and Jonathan's pretty good ways away. So the only chance he has, he takes off from one side of the roof on a full dead run, leaps, and flies across. Luckily, the door to get inside the building is locked, so Pinker's trying to bust the door open. And Jonathan, with this amazingly beautiful looking running drop kick, just drop kicks Pinker right in the back. Pinker smashes his face into the door and goes down. Parker then football tackles him, and the fight's on. And they have this badass fight scene. And I've heard this said in other reviews too, and it's true. Jonathan kicks some ass. He doesn't just take a beating, which he does, but he gives one too. Pinker gets beat up pretty good too. Parker's no wussy. He's no at this point you killed his mother, you killed his sister, and you killed his girlfriend who was going to be his wife. So you have totally destroyed this guy's life at this point. He has nothing left to lose, and he goes after Pinker with everything he has. And they have this badass fight scene. Pinker starts to get the upper hand, has his knife out to stab him, and when he does, the police bust through the door, arrest him, and you start to get a sense from some of the lines by Pinker that there's a little more there than what we know. Pinker says, she died real hard, your girlfriend, and just Jonathan starts screaming, "I'll see you dead, you son of a bitch!" And that's when Pinker goes, "Oh yeah, it's in the blood. You and me were killers." Just a little seed. Basically, Lieutenant Parker says, calm down, let the state kill him. He's going to fry. There's no way he's not going to fry. And so it immediately sets us up to the execution scene. I mean, just immediately. And it's really this is where it starts to get a little crazy. Pinker's in his jail cell as they come to get him for the execution, and he's like praying to the TV gods or something. I don't know. This is TV set in a cell. And these lips come flying out of the cell, and Pinker says, "Give it to me." And this thing says, "You got it, baby." It just shocks him so hard it just knocks him unconscious. The police, the guards think he's dead, so they try to do mouth to mouth to resuscitate him. I guess I don't understand why, but they tried to do mouth to mouth, and he grabbed this one by the lip. He bit his lip and pulled his lip completely down until part of his lip was on the floor. Then he bit another guy's fingers off, spit him out, and his finger looking good. It's just hilarious stuff. Hilarious lines. and the guards beat the crap out of him, and then get him up, take him into the room for the execution. They strap him in. There's this lady, and there's always somebody who's like, this isn't right. You're treating him like some kind of animal, blah blah blah. And Jonathan has a really good line of, "Why give animals such a bad rep?" They ask him if he has any final words. He says, as a matter of fact, I do, and has this long speech, which Mitch Pileggi said on this Blu-ray that Wes Craven wrote that speech for him while they were getting ready to shoot it, because Wes didn't know what kind of actor Pileggi really was. He knew he was big and he was physical and he could physically do the part. He didn't know how good of an actor Mitch Pileggi really is. So when he realized it as time went on, he decided to go ahead and write this dialogue out for Mitch Pileggi where he basically says, Parker, I'm your father. Uh, Jonathan Parker, I'm your father, is basically what it boils down to. He talks about when he beat him when he was a kid. He killed his mother right in front of him. And Pinker has a really distinct limp. And it's because when Jonathan Parker was a kid, he saw Pinker killing his mom. He took a gun and shot him in the knee. So he had that limp ever since. And basically he has no fear of dying at all. So they pull the switch, the execution happens, things start to go haywire, the lights go out. When the lights come back on, he's gone, completely out of the chair. Obviously, at that point, people are freaking out, scared to death. The guards are in there trying to figure out where he went, thinking he couldn't have gone very far. He just took this massive jolt of electricity. Uh, Jonathan and his dad are in the chamber. Jonathan goes to close the door, and Pinker's behind the door and just collapses and just turns into this big ball of fire and disappears completely. And that's one of my favorite lines in the movie is as Lieutenant Parker saying, "Man, that chair really kicks ass." And at this point, the doctor, earlier during the execution, when he didn't die the first time, they sent the doctor in there to check him out for some reason. I don't know why they would do that. He's obviously not dead. His eyes are open. He's laughing and he's breathing. He's obviously not dead. But they sent the doctor in there to check him out. And when they did, the electricity went off on her. And at that point, Pinker's soul was no longer in his body. His body was just a bunch of fried meat, as Lieutenant Parker says, a bunch of fried meat, because his soul has now jumped into this doctor. The police officers put her in the car, try to take her to the hospital to get her checked out. Pinker brings her to life, kills both cops, or kills one cop, and then the other cop is driving and drives right into the side of a big gas rig, and it blows up. It was an awesome scene, a great, everything's really, really cool. Hey there. Thanks for watching. Thanks for commenting. That's pretty cool. I didn't know if I was even going to have any live viewers. But it was a great moment, great scene. He has a really funny line as the doctor. He's like, "How about a little head?" or something like that. We are reviewing Wes Craven's Shocker, which is a 1989 horror film that I am a huge fan of that gets massively over or underrated. Here's the Blu-ray to Shocker. And so at this point, everybody thinks Pinker's dead. He's jumping in and out of bodies. He's got this ability to use the electrical currents to jump back and forth. And so Jonathan starts to realize what's going on. His father obviously doesn't believe him. The police officer that they thought was dead, that they thought was in the car, that was going to die, survived. And what movie would that be? And anyway, things go on. Pinker keeps jumping out of bodies inside of a little girl's body, inside of a construction worker's body. And at this point, Allison comes back. Anyway, he thinks Pinker starts to come back. Allison has just come back. Her spirit has come back to help Jonathan out. And This little necklace he gave her right before she died was basically the only way to to stop Pinker. Is this little necklace, heart shaped necklace, and the power of love, which yes can be kind of hokey, but I thought it was really cool. I thought it was a good idea. The construction worker, when he was inside the construction worker's body, got the necklace and threw it into a lake. So it's at the bottom of a lake. There's only one way to get there, and that's or to see it, and that's to get some goggles that was at Jonathan's house. And as he goes there, his coach is then taken over by Pinker. So Pinker is now turned into the coach. A little bit later, he turns into the father. And basically, they realize that the only way to kill Pinker is by using the television. I have to admit, I've never really fully figured out where that came from, so I'm not doing a better job of explaining it. But basically, using the television, they have some really fun scenes towards the end where they're running in and out of TV shows. Leave It to Beaver, Frankenstein, a game show, a tele. Oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, there's a priest, a pastor there trying to get money from his congregation. Just some funny stuff, some funny lines that Pinker has throughout this scene. And it all comes back to that bedroom where the mom and sister were. That's where the final showdown happens. And of course, Jonathan survives. Hi, Lisa. Nice to meet you too. Um, it's a fantastically fun movie, man. It really, really is. Like I don't understand why it gets the hate that it does. I wish I did. I wish I understood why. Because it's such a fun movie. And it's a movie that if you don't take things so seriously and just go watch a movie for fun, there's no way you could not enjoy Shocker. The music is phenomenal. The soundtrack is great. You can actually find the soundtrack. People have uploaded the soundtrack onto YouTube, so you can find it on YouTube. Just look up Shocker soundtrack, and the songs on there are great. The song called "Shocker" by Dudes of Wrath, which is the main title song. The Sword and the Stone, which is a Kiss demo that Kiss did that was redone by a group called Bonfire. They covered it for the movie. There was a really good cover of No More Mr. Nice Guy, Alice Cooper's No More Mr. Nice Guy by Megadeth. It's on the soundtrack as well. And then the group Dudes of Wrath, who did the song Shocker, which is basically a super group. And I wish I could remember everybody that was involved in the group, but while I can't remember everybody's names, I do know that Alice Cooper sung, did a song called Shock Dance, which is also on the soundtrack, in which Mitch Pileggi did a rap as Horace Pinker. And that was by the group The Dudes of Wrath, but it was Alice Cooper singing that one. And the other one, it was Paul Stanley. And for Shocker, it was Paul Stanley of Kiss doing the lead vocals. The soundtrack was amazing. The special effects, you got to remember, this was 1988 when they shot this, 1989 when it came out. The special effects were great for that time period. And the fact they were able to maneuver themselves, you see Pinker and Jonathan inside a Leave It to Beaver episode. You see him on the set of a news show. You see him on the set of Frankenstein, like in the middle of the movie Frankenstein. Just cool stuff, man. Wes Craven was so far ahead of his time. He tried to do a new Nightmare on Elm Street. He was trying to create another Freddy Krueger. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, I love Freddy Krueger. He's my favorite horror character of all time. I think Horace Pinker could have been just as good. They just never gave it a chance. The movie made a decent amount of money at the box office, but it wasn't this massive hit that Universal expected it to be. So they pulled the plug. But Mitch Pileggi has said himself in the DVD or the Blu-ray bonus features that he was willing to do it. He thought it was going to be the start of a franchise. And he was excited about that. So was Wes, because Wes did not get to have any of the Nightmare on Elm Street royalties because New Line kind of went off and did that on their own. And so he was kind of bitter. I love Sorry Wes, rest in peace, but he was kind of bitter. So he wanted to try to create another Freddy Krueger, and this one for Universal Studios, and get the opportunity to be a part of the sequels and make more money off of it. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. There's been some talk recently over the last few years of a remake, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not against remakes. I'm not one of those people. In fact, I'll review some remakes that I really enjoy on the show or on these videos. But I think a Shocker remake could do well. It's just you have to get the right person because Mitch Pileggi was perfect in the role, and so getting somebody to take his place would be very, very difficult. Not saying it can't happen. I'm not saying it wouldn't be good. With today's special effects, it could be really, really good. But unfortunately, and Vince Pileggi said himself in his interview, he said, bring me in. I want to be part of it. If it does get remade, I want a part. It just won't be Horace Pinker because of his age and his arthritis. Because when he was younger, he admitted he would do all of his own stunts, and it really messed him up as time went on. So this movie gets, like I said, just unnecessary hate, unnecessary ridicule. It's Wes Craven's most underrated movie, in my opinion. And I'm glad that, thank you, Shout Factory, for actually putting out a Blu ray because I remember when I found out it was happening, I was like a kid in a candy store. I was so happy. Like a kid on Christmas Eve. And when it came out, I literally went to a place called Hastings Video, which is no longer around, unfortunately. But I looked and looked and looked. When I finally found it, I almost cried. I was so happy. And surprised I haven't wore the Blu ray out yet. But they go through the bonus features real quick before we get off of here. There's a audio commentary with Wes Craven, which was done around 2000, between 2007 and 2010. And a new commentary with director of photography Jacques Haken, who also did the first two Nightmare on Elm Street movies. Producer Robert Engelman and composer William Goldstein. There's an interview with Mitch Pileggi called No More Mr. Nice Guy. And an interview with Cammie Cooper, who played Allison. And also an interview with executive producer Shep Gordon. The music of Shocker is a 26, 27-minute feature that was really good and talks about all the songs. There is a vintage interviews and behind the scenes thing that came out in 1988 when he was being shot. There was also a trailer and some radio spots. So a really good set of bonus features. The interview with Mitch Pileggi was great. You can find it on YouTube as well. I watched it on YouTube the other day. And the same with the interview with Cammie Cooper. They were both actually up on YouTube. But, still go get the Blu-ray. If Shout Factory still has Blu-ray copies, go buy the Blu-ray because the picture looks great, the audio is great, and you get, the commentaries, which being a big movie nerd, I'm a huge fan of commentaries. So I was really excited about the Blu-ray. It didn't disappoint. I thought it was great. I love having it. And it's just a movie that I will continue to try my best to champion as long as I can because I think it's such a fun movie. And that's the thing with me, folks. I'm not, when I do some of these reviews, I'm not trying to have my world changed. If I enjoy a movie, and by the way, I'm going to enjoy a lot of movies that you guys don't. I'm not one of those people that just likes everything just because other people do. If I like it, I like it. If I don't, I don't. But I'm very, very simple. If I like the movie, it's because it entertained me. It's because I had fun with it. Even if it's a depressing kind of movie, if I had fun with it, or if I was entertained by it, or if it made me think and in a good way, then I'm going to like it and I'm going to give it a good review. If I thought it was stupid and I didn't have any fun with it, I don't care if anybody else did. That's just how I am. If I like it, I'll give it a good review. If I don't like it, I won't. And so, Shocker, again, the last review I did, I gave that one a 9 out of 10. I'm going to give this one a 9 out of 10. And the only reason it's not perfect is because there are a couple of moments in the movie where things get a little slow. And I get why they did that, but it kind of drug it down just a little bit. But all in all, to me, it's a near perfect Wes Craven movie just because it was so highly entertaining. The gore was plenty. The special effects were good. The humor was great. The inventiveness was awesome. And we've seen 10 Nightmare on Elm Street movies. Actually, 9 Nightmare on Elm Street movies. I would love to have seen 7 or 8 Shockers. But unfortunately, it didn't happen. But maybe one day they'll remake it and they'll be able to start it then. But wow, yeah, I went 36 minutes of this video. So thank you for whoever's watching. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Lisa, for watching. If you're still there, it looks like somebody is. And join me next time. I have not decided what I'm going to review next. It's possibly going to be a movie that I was a part of, a film by another local Arkansas guy called Queen Cobra. I think that might be what I interview or what I review next. But for right now, my name is Aaron Wojciechowski. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you guys next time.